All right. What do you guys think is the number one restrictor or limiting factor to strength? My answer to that question has changed over time. I went from thinking it was my quads, my hamstrings, my glutes, my triceps, the big primal movers or primary movers of certain lifts. But last few days, I've done something which kind of got me thinking. It planted a seed in my mind, and I started thinking along a different kind of line. And that line is basically core. A few days ago, I loaded 260 kilos on the bar, on the squat, and I basically unracked it and I held it for time. It was extremely heavy, and I knew that there was no way in hell I could walk that out and even do a quarter squat. And so, what is it that gives me that idea that it's too heavy? I started thinking about that a lot. Why do I know that this is too heavy? And the best answer I can come up with is the spinal cord. I do not have the ability to stabilize my spinal cord under such load. My body is not strong enough to protect its most vital thing, which is the brain and the spinal cord. And so the body has all sorts of mechanisms, tension receptors throughout the body to basically tell us, you're going to snap your shit up if you continue doing this. And so it sends feedback into our brain saying, this is way too heavy, get rid of this. On certain days, I walk the bar out, whatever given weight, whatever the daily max is or whatever. And I know this is going to be a battle. Even if I've just unracked it and walked it out, I think to myself, fuck man, this is going to be really heavy. It's interesting because I have not engaged the glutes, the quads, the hamstrings, my lower back. Nothing's been engaged. I've just walked this weight out. And sometimes the warm-up doesn't even give me an indication this is the case. Sometimes the warm-up feels really, really good. And then I get to 180 and I'm like, God damn, this feels really, really heavy on my back. And so I'm becoming sure of the fact that the core is everything. I'm thinking about a lot of these athletes in the world in many different disciplines who are extremely strong, but they do not have the primal movies, the primary movies like hypertrophied to hell and back. They don't have that. They don't have big hamstrings or glutes or quads or backs, and yet they are moving an incredible amount of weight. I think that is because they have extreme amount of strength within their core. Now, what is the core? The core can be defined by many different things. Some people say from the chin all the way down to your pelvis, everything's core. Other people say it's underneath your rib cage and your pelvis, that's the core. I'm more inclined to say that it's everything around the spinal cord. And the weakest link within the spinal cord is where we don't have ribs and where the pelvis is. In that little abdominal region or lumbar region of the spine, we don't have a lot of rigidity. There's not a lot of bone structure. The ribs stop, and then there's a gap, and then the pelvis. And so you could say that is the core because that is the weakest part of the core. And so how do we strengthen that to get stronger? One of the things that I've always thought about over time is that I do not want to just gain a heap of weight to get strong. I don't want to be 130 kilos squatting 300 kilos. That to me is not a victory. I don't want to do that. Some of you guys might be thinking to yourself, why not? Well, to me, I've always said this, and I'll continue to say it, that it's all about health for me. Honestly, it is. I do not want to trade in a health point for a strength point. To me, the net gain is zero. I want to retain my body weight, somewhere in the 90 kilos for 6 foot, 184, 85 centimeters. I think 95 kilos is really solid. I look like I lift, and if I could get really, really strong, then I'm winning. I'm kicking goals. And so if we are going to make that assumption that I don't want to get much heavier, how do I get stronger? Do you know what I mean? Like, There's certainly people out there who are 60 kilos squatting way more than me. So where is the missing link? And I think the missing link is in the core. You see, what I think is happening is that when you unrack the bar that's too heavy for your core, you're being antagonized by the central nervous system throughout the body to not be able to, it's basically inhibiting some of the big muscles that you have, and limiting its output, limiting the amount of force it can put out, because at the end of the day, the central nervous system is the main driver of the whole body, right? It's what indicates how much we're going to push, and it indicates how much, force we're going to be applying through each muscle. So if the spinal cord is compromised, as in the stability is not there, you can't exhibit your full potential through your quads, glutes, hamstrings, and so on, the big muscles. So it's the supporting muscles which need to be brought up in order for you to fully exhibit, the primary muscles' full potential. I have had indirectly, sort of like around the way, roundabout way of working out that some days I come in here and the bar feels extremely heavy, and other days it feels really light. What is going on there? Yes, you could say the central nervous system, rest, food, blah, 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 blah. Another thing that comes into my head when I say food is that oftentimes, there's a pattern forming, and I like to look at patterns. When I have a big meal and I come in here hour and a half to 2 hours after the meal, I have an extreme difficulty lifting decent weight. I don't know about you guys, but my core, I think it's the core, because of the fluid bolus in my belly, has struggled as a hard time of bracing and making sure my spinal cord can fully send out the signals to its fullest potential. So in other words, my spinal cord gets compromised when I eat food because it can't tighten up that musculature around the stomach, around the intestines. This is why I feel a lot stronger on an empty stomach. Now, I've just eaten maybe an hour and a half ago, and just sitting here, I feel, I'm not going to be able to lift a little weight. So anyway, just food for thought. In the last few days, I know yesterday I did 3 squat sessions, and I had every time I came in here, I thought about certain things. And I think what's happening is my core in the last month has weakened. When I went back to the journal and looked at it, ever since I implemented the West Side stuff, because it was just a sheer amount of new stimulus, I've dropped off some of my core work, and I've also dropped off some strength. So I'm going to try and incorporate some more kind of core work and see where that takes me. I've already done a few sets of suitcase carries, which brings me to my next point of this video, which I want to talk about. I'm already at 8 minutes. I know I'm kind of ranting, but I think this is valuable information. It's going to kind of show my next direction in my training. I know I'm 360 days in, for God's sake, almost 360 days in. And it's been a year. But nevertheless, that doesn't faze me all that much. Every day that I've trained, I've had an opportunity to learn. And all I really care about is opportunities to learn. And I've learned a hell of a lot. But anyway, 360 days, blah, 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 blah. When it comes to core, when it comes to suitcase carries, that's what triggered my next thought, is that which muscle within the core is predominantly the most responsible for core stability. I've looked into this recently, and I've looked into some kind of Russian or Eastern, scientists or sports gurus who keep saying over and over again from different sources that the obliques are the most important muscle to train when it comes to weightlifting. The reason for that is that they contribute the most to increasing intra-abdominal pressure than any other muscle. Yes, the rectus abdominis, the six-pack muscle that runs from basically the ribs all the way down to the pubic bone, is bulky. But its function is to flex the spine. It brings you forward. When we're lifting, we don't want to do that at all. That's not what we're trying to do, because if we do that, then we compromise our positioning and the lift's over. The rectus abdominis can increase intra-abdominal pressure, but because of its function of flexing the spine, it's limited because we can't fully engage that muscle because we will compromise the back, like I said. And for each bit of flexion that we have in the rectus abdominis, the opposite muscle on the spine, the rectus of the spine, rectus spinae, they also need to fight that flexion of the rectus abdominis. So you kind of have like this seesaw battle between the front and the back, and the net gain is 0. So yes, you can flex the abdominis, the six pack, and you can also flex this, but it's kind of like you're fighting against yourself for intra-abdominal pressure. The best way to go about it, and that's what they say, this is not my theories, is to look at the obliques. Now the obliques have many different functions. One of them is the anti-rotation, meaning they do this, they rotate our spine, our thorax around, but training the obliques doing this is also counterproductive, because once again, the function of lifting heavy weight is to avoid doing this and doing this, right? We don't want that motion in our lifting. That's what gets us injured. So to train the obliques doing this is the same as training the six-pack doing this. So how do we train the obliques? Well, we train it through anti-rotation movements. Some of you guys have never heard of this, but there's an exercise which is really popular. It's called the Pallof press. It's basically, I'll just give you a quick explanation. You take a band and you tie it up to a bar or a cage or whatever. You walk it out, right, and you hold it out like this. So the band is kind of going perpendicular to your body, to where you're facing, and you're holding it out this way. So if the bar wants to pull you this way, you're just holding it like this. So you're anti-rotating the bar, the body. So the band wants to pull you in rotation, you're just resisting it. That's one way of training the obliques. One of the other functions of the obliques is to prevent lateral flexion. So lateral flexion is this. Once again, we can train anti-lateral flexion through what I've already done, and this is what kind of the whole story is about, suitcase carry. A suitcase carry is basically like a farmer's carry, where you carry 2 implements side by side and you take it for a walk. A suitcase carry is just deleting one of those implements and just having one side loaded. What that means is that the weight wants to laterally flex you towards the side of the weight. The obliques turn on and anti-lateral flex your spine. So it prevents the flexion, lateral flexion on the spine because of this weight. So it just prevents flexion. So you can see that everything that we do with the core is supposed to be anti. The planks are an anti-movement. Pallof press is an anti-movement. The suitcase is an anti. The whole idea is that we want the spine to be challenged in its optimal position. This is the spine, and we don't want to be doing this with our various different vertebrae to train the given muscles. We just want to have the spine straight, and then have forces going at all different directions, and we just stay there and basically absorb the forces and remain our alignment. So you can get creative with this. You can do all sorts of things. The most ironic thing is that anti-rotation exercises, anti-forces I'm going to call them, exercises for the core, typically lends us to like labor work. If you think about it, people that are working labor jobs, that's what they're doing. They're carrying stuff, whether it be in the hands, whether they're carrying it like this, whether they're carrying it over the shoulder, whether they're pulling something. It's never an implement where you got a nice barbell and everything's fixed and nice. It's always out of whack. So strongman competitors are often tasked with moving odd objects about, and they have really, really strong cores. I mean, you have to have a strong core to pick up an odd-shaped rock. There's no handlebars on it. Oftentimes they're grabbing it like this and they're pulling it. It's just weird as hell. So I'm going to show you a video next, and you'll see me walking around like a loony in my backyard with this 20 kilo kettlebell that I have. That's one way of doing it. Like today I've decided to train my obliques directly, anti-flexion, lateral flexion. That's what I'll be doing today. Yesterday I was doing hanging knee raises. Now you might be thinking, isn't hanging knee raises spinal flexion? It's not, because what's happening with hanging leg raises is that you're hanging, number one, and you are lifting your knees up towards your chest. The six-pack muscle is not responsible for that movement, because the six-pack muscle starts or originates from the rib cage and inserts to the pelvis, right? We are lifting the knees. So the rectus abdominis is not connected to your knee, therefore it can't act on the femur. It does not act on the femur. What acts on the femur is a bunch of muscles called hip flexors, mainly the psoas. The psoas starts in the spine, your lumbar spine, predominantly, and T12, I think. T12 to like L5. It's like a fan. Each vertebra gets one portion of the psoas. And it goes through your gut, basically, and inserts into the proximal femur, which is the top of your femur. And so when that contracts, your legs come up. So why is that a core exercise? Well, number one, the psoas is the king of the core. It's the only thing that flexes basically the chief thing that flexes the hip. But what's happening in that is, I need you to imagine this, and you can look this up, but I'm going to try and explain the best I can. When your psoas contracts, your spine automatically wants to, how do I explain this? So when you lift your leg up like this, right? Your psoas starts from here. Your psoas starts from your lumbar spine, right there, and goes through your body and inserts into the femurs. When that muscle gets shorter, your leg comes up. When that muscle also gets shorter, your lumbar spine wants to do this. Right? It just wants to automatically do this because you're shortening the distance between the femur and its origin, which is the lumbar. So when you shorten something, when you shorten a muscle, it pulls the two objects together. Now, what's the muscle responsible for reversing that lumbar lordosis? It's the rectus abdominis. So the rectus abdominis pulls you into shape. So when you're doing leg raises and you're keeping a straight body, you're lifting your leg up and you're resisting the pull on the spine. You're basically rooting the spine in the same position through like this isometric contraction between the two muscles. I hope that explains it well. Basically, the psoas pulls on the spine and the rectus abdominis pulls the spine back into position. So you're kind of concreting the psoas in its origin point and only allowing the femur to move. Might be a little bit difficult to understand without proper explanation and imaging and looking at stuff, but I hope you understand that. So with the leg raises, I'm targeting the psoas. There's also the iliopsoas, the hip flexors essentially. And I'm also targeting the rectus abdominis because of its isometric contraction fighting the psoas's movement on the spine. So psoas, rectus abdominis one day, the next day I'm doing obliques. Now, you can't really isolate any core muscle in its entirety. You can just kind of train movements, which is kind of the whole thing about strength training. You should spend the majority of your time training movements, movement patterns, rather than isolating muscles. So today I'm going to train a movement pattern where I load one side and I take it for a walk. And then on the odd day, I'm going to try and target the other plane of motion, which is leg raises. Basically, it's a long ass explanation. I'm already at 18 minutes. I'm fully aware of that. It's going to be another long video. I'm going to show you a video now of what I'm going to do with the suitcase carry. I highly recommend you try that. And also, I highly recommend you load up a super max weight on a bar. Don't be stupid. Be safe with it. Maybe go like 20 kilos above your 1 rep max, and just unrack it. I don't even want you to walk it out. Unrack it and see what it feels. My body initially started shaking, and that shaking is basically the central nervous system freaking out and trying to fire whatever muscle it has to stabilize the spine. I have not squatted, like my legs are not engaged. Nothing. It's just the core stabilizing the spine and the vertebra that are stacked from basically the neck all the way down to the pelvis. That's where the force is. So that shakiness is the body trying to coordinate certain muscle groups. Now, clearly the muscle groups involved for stabilization of my spine are not strong enough to handle 260 kilos on my back. And so, long ass explanation about why I think the core is your and mine limiting factor to strength. A lot of times, like I've already said, I look at some of you guys lifting, I look at myself lifting, I look at some all the other people lift, and I'm like, that person has extremely developed legs. Why isn't he squatting more? The form looks good. His hypertrophy throughout the legs is fantastic. Why is he being outlifted by a freaking 20 kilo lighter Olympic athlete in China. Automatically you could say genetics, whatever. I don't even think about that. Or drugs. Okay, no worries. Another good point. But I don't just think about excuses. I think about what's going on there. I challenge you guys to work on your core. I'm going to challenge myself to work on my core every single day. Do all the different things every single day. So anyway, this is going to be a freaking hour-long video if I don't stop it here. So this is just my thoughts about core. I'm going to try and set it up so you guys can see me walking around the backyard doing my farmer's carry. It's basically, I do 120 steps one direction, and then I swap my hands over and walk around the same path again. So it's 100 odd steps one way. Really feel the obliques working. Anyway, let me set it up. There we go. Very exciting stuff, isn't it? Watching me walk around with the weight in my backyard. But I hope it gives you an idea of what I'm actually doing. So that's basically one set. Takes a while because you got to do each hand. And you know, normally I walk around the backyard, so it's one lap of the backyard, 120 odd steps. But because I was out of camera and whatever, I decided to just walk up and back, and it's much easier for you guys to see what's up. So that's basically it. Obliques. Train your core. I think the core is the key. I think the core is our limiting factor. And so I'm going to put that into a bit of a experimentation cycle, give it a few weeks to see how I feel, just basically working on core. And yeah, I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to show you my top set of my squat, which I'm about to do now. And that's it. It's a very long video, but I hope it was worth it. Cheers, guys. Catch you guys.